Welcome back to the Candy Corn Quilt Shop Quilt Along. We are on the week of October 13th. This week we have some traditional quilting blocks to make. We've got large pinwheels, small pinwheels, and we will add quilting to these, and then we're going to work on the section 1 and 2 border blocks. I've got all my fabric selected and my batting cut. I went over this at the end of last week's video. Let's start with the pinwheels. I'll step you through how to make one of the pinwheel blocks. We'll have to make 3 large and 3 small. So I'll show you how to make one, and then we can make all of them and quilt them. I'm going to use this friction fine liner today. We have a fabric A and a fabric B. I'm going to make the green my fabric A. If you're working with white, that's your fabric A. They have us make these the exact size that we need to put into the quilt, and this causes a little bit of difficulty when we add our quilting. You can make them slightly oversized and then trim them later after the quilting. You'll see what I mean later in the video. Everything ends up coming out just fine, no worries. You're going to take your fabric A, flip it to the back, and I like to do this when I'm drawing the lines on my cutting mat. See how there's a line here and here? And I'll actually line up the corners of my fabric on my cutting mat because sometimes I'm not the best with the ruler. This way I know I've got that straight. Then I'm going to grab a ruler. We want to mark corner to corner. I'm going to use this friction fine liner. It'll disappear with ironing, and since this is in the seam, I'm not worried about what's called a ghost line, which happens with the friction pens. Hold my pen here in the corner, got my ruler, and I can double check and make sure I'm following the line on my mat. I'm going to draw a straight line. It should be as close to corner as possible. If it's a little off, that's okay. We're going to be squaring up these blocks. I'm grabbing a purple one for the next set of lines. You've got your center line on my square that's in pink. They want us to measure a 1/4 inch away. My ruler has a 1/4 inch mark. It's a Creative Grids ruler. And draw another line a 1/4 inch away. Let's draw that line. And then one on the other side. Like that. I'll hold that up. You're going to take this piece of fabric, your fabric A, then you have your fabric B fabric, right sides together. Make sure those right sides are together. And then I'm going to grab a couple of pins, and I'm going to pin on the pink line. The pink line is going to end up being your cut line. So you can put a pin right there, and it won't get in the way while you sew. Well, unless it's a crooked pin like that one, I'll have to be careful. I would grab a crooked pin. Just like that. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew right along the purple lines. Here's my stitching, as close to on top of that line as I can get, and then we're going to use the center line as our cut line. Grab your ruler, line it up on the cut line. You can cut this with scissors too if you want. Now we have the 2 triangles. We're going to need to press these. I'm going to press with the seam going toward the dark, the purple. I'm going to do that, and then I'll bring these back. Here's what that looks like after it's pressed. You want to go ahead and cut off the little triangles. They call these dog ears. Go ahead and cut those off. And then any little stray threads I'm going to get rid of too. It tells us to square these to 2.5 inches square. I'm going to give you 2 methods to square your blocks. 2.5 inch square ruler. Really easy. Place it on your block. It's got this nice diagonal line down the middle. Line it up with the diagonal, and then you'll cut around. Rotating cutting mat will help with that. This is a 5-inch square ruler. It still has a line down the middle. What you can do, line up that line on the diagonal, and I'm just going to trim a little bit off to make sure I have a nice straight edge. So we'll cut that there and that there. Now I know that these 2 are straight. Going to rotate it. These are the 2 that I just cut. Now I'm going to take this ruler, it's 2.5 here, 2.5 here, and I have that diagonal line. Make sure everything lines up and looks good. It does look good. 2.5 inches square. We're going to need 4 of these, so I've got one ready. I need to trim that one, and then I need to make one more set, and then I'll show you how to put it together to make your pinwheel. We've got all 4 of our little blocks. Now we need to make our pinwheel. Just lay everything out. You can tell if you do it wrong. See, that doesn't look right. There we go. So I've got green, purple, green, purple, green, purple, green, purple. I'm going to sew these 2 together right along this line. These 2 together along this line. This one I'm going to press this way toward the purple, and this one I'm going to press this way toward the purple. That'll allow my seams to nest. I'll show you that. Here's my 2 little rows. I pressed to the purple this way and to the purple on this one. So your seams are going in opposite directions. We're going to sew these rows together. What's nice about being able to nest your seams, you can slide your blocks and you'll feel it. It kind of locks together. You can pin. I happen to have a clip handy. I want to show you the seam. See how that locks together really nice? And all of this is being sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, regular traditional quilting, but just in case you are new to putting this type of block together, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to take this over to my machine and sew the 1/4 inch seam. Here's the seam. There's your pinwheel block. I am going to press this open. There's a lot of bulk here in the center, and we're going to be running this under the embroidery machine. Here's my completed block. It does look a little bit crooked, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. We're pressed open, and this block should measure 4.5 inches squared. I have to make 2 more large, and then we have to make 3 small. The small are made the same way. The big difference is this section is going to be 1.5 inches square, and the entire block will be 2.5 inches square. I'm going to go ahead and make all of those off camera. Here's a quick look at all my pinwheel blocks. The large pinwheels are going to go in different spots throughout the quilt. The 3 small ones will end up being sewn together in a row, but if you look at the quilting instructions, we're actually going to quilt each one with a different design, and then we're going to sew them together. If you don't have the quilting bundle, you can sew them together first. In fact, you can do this if you have the quilting bundle, it doesn't matter. And you can pick a file that's 2.5 by 6.5, or it'll be 2 by 6, and then you can quilt that all as one piece if you like. I'm going to make this easy on myself for the thread. I'm going to use the green glow-in-the-dark thread. We're going to start with our large pinwheels. I went over the quilting last week. I missed one. I think the reason I missed this one is because this 3rd pinwheel technically is in section 5, and we're doing sections 1 and 2. That's why I don't think I saw it. But right down here, there's another quilting file. I need to put that on my USB. I'll be able to quilt these all in my largest hoop, and I'll show you how I'm going to lay it out to make it fit. They have to lay out like this. I'm going to load the light mesh cutaway, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten, and let's head over to the machine. I'm on my baby lock meridian today. We're going to load all the pinwheel files. We've got 1 in section 1, 1 in section 3, and 1 in section 5, so we're going to get ahead a little bit. I've got my quilting files pulled. The pinwheel in section 1 and 3 use the same file. It's this one right here. It's called KDQ 007 Chevron 1 4x4 horizontal. But if you accidentally do the vertical, it doesn't matter because you can turn it. I've got one here. What I want to do, lift it up and out of the way, hit edit. I'm going to use this border button to duplicate. We've talked about these buttons before. I'm going to add it below. And then actually I need to space them out a little bit. What this is going to do is stitch out the same step on these at the same time. So as we're quilting these 2 are going to get done at the same time, and then the 3rd one, which is different, will get done after. We have to add that one. This is the one that's in section 5, but let's take care of that today. It's KDQ 017 Halloween 3 4x4. Slide it over, And now we're good to go. We can work on everything at once. I am going to save it to my machine. See how it has everything twice? That's because these two are going to go first. So we have our batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, then there's quilting, and then we'll do this one after. I've got my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop on. This is the light mesh cutaway, neutral thread on my machine until I get to the point where we do the quilting, then I'll switch to that glow in the dark thread. Let's start with these two pinwheels. We're going to do the batting placement line. We need to place our batting for these two. So 1, 2, and then we're going to do the tack down line. You need to trim away your excess batting. We're going to stitch our fabric placement line. How I know where to place my pinwheel blocks, I did this last week. Everything has a number. My number 2, dark purple, green bubble. My number 34, green swirl, orange cobweb. And then down here is my number 19, black bubble, dark purple. These two, number 2 and number 19, are going to have the same quilting. The one with the different quilting is your number 34. We're back over at the table, and I'm going to explain why. We had to make these before we could quilt these, and they have us make them oversized, trim down the bits, and then sew it together, and it comes out as 4.5 inches square. Your fabric placement line right here is 4.5 inches square. You want to take your time and try to get that centered. And the quilting is 4 by 4 because it allows for the seam allowance, but we're going to need to tape these because we don't have the extra fabric that we normally have with the way we normally do the quilting. That's just the way this is working out. This is a little bit different than normal. I'm not sure I've ever done one of their quilts like this, but this is an older quilt, so I'm going to take the time. Make sure it's nice and flat. Make sure your block is nice and pressed. And add the tape. I'm trying not to add it more than 1/4 inch because anything that's more than 1/4 inch is going to end up needing to be picked out because it'll be in the seam allowance. I'll have to pick out what looks like a little bit there. Let's adjust. So try to tape within 1/4 inch if you can, otherwise you have to pick out the tape, and picking out tape from the quilting can be kind of a pain. So let's tape around both of these blocks. I've got these taped all the way around. If you don't mind picking out tape, you can tape the corners. It would be a little faster, but I hate picking out tape from quilting. We're going to go back to the machine. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the fabric tack down line. Let's take a quick look at this. I can tell in certain spots this tack down line hasn't even touched my fabric, so I'm glad I taped all the way around. I'm going to switch to my glow in the dark green. We'll do the quilting, and then I'll show you what that looks like. These are all quilted. I'm going to switch to my neutral thread, and we're going to go through all the same steps for this other block. I'll go ahead and set that to music because you just saw that with these. The only thing you want to watch out for is I need to remove a little bit of this tape or it's going to get caught under this other block. So I'm going to take off tape here and here and make sure all that's out of the way. These are all quilted. They all look great. We have space in our hoop. We've got space here and up here, even a little bit in here. Let's see if we can fit the small pinwheels into this hoop. I had to step away from my machine and we have a storm going through, so I had to turn it off and back on. Let's load our file. My hoop is still sitting on my machine, and remember I have this in memory on my machine. So this accurately reflects what's in my hoop. You can move these, but we've already stitched these, so we don't want to mess with that. We just want to add the new blocks for the small pinwheels and see if they're going to fit. Let's start with top and bottom. They use the same quilting design. There's one there, and then I'm going to go ahead and just add it again. I'm not going to mess with duplicate button, border button. I'm just going to do one at a time. This will make more sense for me. Makes it easier. There's my top and bottom. Middle, this one uses a different design. It's all going to fit. I'm going to save this. We're ready to go. I'm going to put my neutral thread back on my machine and we're going to start stitching our little blocks. One thing about doing them this way is the piece of batting I cut is not going to work. I'll need a square here, here, and here. I'm going to grab my scrap batting. So if you already cut a piece and you're doing it like this, sorry I made you waste a piece of batting, but say that you can use it for something else. These are going to stitch out just like these three. I'll go ahead and record it, but I'll set it to music and I'll just record the first one. I have my neutral thread back on my machine and I'm going to go ahead and start with the one in the top right. Keep an eye on your machine. Mine went back all the way to the beginning, so I have to advance the pattern. Let's have a look at it. Why did it go back to the top? Remember I told you I had to turn my machine off and on and then I added everything. So then when it started, it went back to the beginning. So be careful if you do this. Now I'm ready to go. These are all stitched out. Something I noticed, the top and the bottom have quilting that has a center. It's like one of those candy corn flowers. This one I hit almost spot on. The first one, my top corner of the hoop, see how it's shifted? I really wasn't paying attention where I was placing the block. I was trying to make sure I just got it within those lines. If it bothers you, make sure it's centered first so your quilting can be centered. It doesn't bother me. It never bothers me. It's just not something to stress about. These are all done. I'm going to go ahead and set these aside. We'll do all of our trimming at the end. We're back at our home screen. Let's look at our border blocks. I've got them all in here. I think I made a folder for each one. I did. See the numbers? These are the numbers of the border blocks. Today we're going to be doing numbers 3, 4, 9, 10, and 12. That's it. Let's bring them up one by one and see if they fit. I think these will fit. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make sure that this one is active. We're going to rotate it 90. It's going to be tight, but I think I can get them all fit in one hoop. It's going to be close. There we go. All the way down. Wow, they do fit, but this will be a are you comfortable with it kind of thing. I'm going to try it just for the heck of it, why not? Because we know that everything is going to be trimmed. These are all kind of right on top of each other. Do you see that? The other thing I could do is move this over. That's better. See, it just took me a minute to figure it out. That's better. Now I have space between everything. Slide this down a little bit so it's not touching the other one. We are all set. So this was 3, 4, 9, 10, and 12. I'm going to hit OK. Save it to my machine. And let's look at the order of the stitch out. This again is going to be my big hoop, the 9.5 by 14. This block will go first, then this one, then this one, then one of these. I can't remember. I was moving them around. One of these, and then the other one of these. This is all border block fabric pieces. This should be really simple. Let me get some new stabilizer in my hoop, load your light mesh cutaway, and we'll work through these. Before we start, we have to put some of these together. The first one that we loaded, number 3, the rectangle with the cobwebs, that's right there in the corner. This block looks like this. We have to make that little checkerboard. We cut the little 2.5-inch squares last week, so I need to go sew these together. Number 4 is ready to go. That's just a solid piece of fabric. 9 and 10 are separate, and I cut one piece of batting because you see they're going to end up together, but we're quilting them separately. 9 is that little 2.5-inch square, and 10. So this does not have to be put together right now. So take this one, set it aside, it's ready to go. Block 12 needs to be sewn together. These are all 2.5-inch squares. These need to be sewn together. So before we do any quilting, we need to put together block 3 and block 12. I've pieced my blocks. Let me show you. This is block 3. This one's ready to go. Let's look at number 12. 12 is really easy. There you go. As we're quilting these, some of these I think we're going to run into the same problem we did with the pinwheels, like this one. This is going to be the exact size as our quilting file, and we cut these to size. I think all of these are cut to size. I'm hoping I didn't misinterpret the directions. It might have been easier to cut these all a little bit bigger, but it is all going to work. Let's stitch these all out together. We're going to start with number 3. It's going to work completely through that block. I've got my neutral thread on my machine. We'll do the batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, and then we'll see how this fits. Looking at this, I think this is going to be just like the pinwheel blocks. Yep, it's an exact match. I'm not sure how to make that easier. I've been sitting here trying to think about it. These two, I suppose you could have cut 2.5 by 3.5 and make them longer. And these you could have cut 3.5-inch square, which would have made them longer on these sides, and then you could trim it at the end. You just have to keep all your squares straight. But the way it is in the instructions is how I cut everything. So tape this down just like before. And then I'm going to switch to my gray glow-in-the-dark thread. Actually, we're going to stitch our fabric tack down, then switch thread, then stitch the quilting. This came out great. Love it. It looks fantastic. I've got another block I'm going to be stitching right there. So this tape needs to go. I have my neutral thread back on my machine. I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way up until we do our fabric placement. And we'll see if this block was big enough or if this block is exact. I'm thinking this piece of fabric is also exact. It is. I don't know if I looked at the wrong page, but I was going through the instructions and that's how I based everything for cutting. This is a solid piece of fabric. If you happen to have more of this fabric, whatever you're using for this spot, and you want to cut a bigger piece, you can. I'm okay with it being exact. Just line it up, just like we did the quilt blocks, right along those stitch lines. I have to stand up, check the top, make sure I've got it all the way. Looks good. I'm going to add some tape, then I'll tack it down. Then I'm going to switch to the green glow-in-the-dark thread for this. This one's all done. We're going to stitch out the little square. That's number 9 for the border blocks. And I'm going to use the gray glow-in-the-dark for the rest of the quilting on the remaining blocks. Then we'll trim these and we'll get ready for next week. These are all done. Let's have a quick look at them. They all look pretty good despite having to be the exact size. Everything fit just fine. I love this one. This one came out really good. Here's the top one. The quilting really does stand out. I can still see the witch though. It's kind of like it's a foggy, stormy night. Here's my little square. And then we have our 2 at the bottom. This one is going to attach to this one. Our little 3 2.5-inch squares sewn together. Let's head over to the cutting table and we're going to get all of these blocks trimmed. I've got all of my blocks out of the hoop. The first thing I'm going to do is get the tape off of everything and rough cut them, separate them apart, get rid of the extra stabilizer, and then we'll trim them all to the right size. Here's a tip for removing tape. This helps me. You can see how it got stitched right over the tape. I'm going to take the big piece off first. And then I use my fingernail and I sort of hold right on the stitch line because I don't want to rip up these stitches. That gets that off really easily. And then you can go take the other piece rather than trying to like rip it and possibly chance ripping out your stitches. Let's start by trimming our large pinwheels. These are going to trim to 4.5 inches square, which is perfect for the 4.5 inch square orange pop rulers. I was thinking about this process. I realized this is the oldest Kimberbell quilt I've put together. I did the Star Spangled Beauty quilt earlier this year, and whenever there's blocks like this, they were pieced in the hoop and they were pieced larger, and then we did the quilting. This is the first one I've done where it had us actually piece a block and then quilt. I've talked about trimming with the orange pop rulers. I always do a quick reminder so you can put the correct size on and then a bigger size, line up along the stitch lines, and when you're lined up, I'm not lined up yet, but when I'm lined up and ready to cut, you take your blade and you put it as far over to the left as possible. Our small pinwheels trimmed to 2.5 inches square. I've got this 2.5 inch square ruler. See how it kind of flips back and forth because it's a quilted block? It's probably easier just to use any ruler. You can see the lines on the back, or you can trim it from the front like we did when we were squaring it up. And go like this and get 2 clean edges. It is a little hard to hold. Let's do one together. Like that. And turn. And it should be 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. I'm going to push it this way and then push it more toward the top. And that looks good. There's a little bit of tape right there. It's within 1/4 inch. That's going to get caught in the seam allowance. You can pick it out if it bothers you, but if not, you can leave it. It'll get sewn into the quilt. Let's do the other two the same way. This is block 3, the one where we put the little squares together. It needs to trim to 4.5 by 6.5. If you have the rectangle orange pop ruler set, there is a 4.5 by 6.5. Here's that block. Same thing with the small pinwheel. There's some tape here. I can measure. If it's within 1/4 inch, it's just within 1/4 inch. It's going to get caught in the seam allowance. I'll just be watching for that as I'm putting this together. This is filler block number 4. It's going to measure 8.5 by 4.5. I'm just going to use a regular ruler. Flip it to the back. It's really easy to see your cut lines on the back. And then you can just put your ruler down right along your cut lines. And now I can check the measurement. I want to flip this ruler, just the way that it reads. I'm looking for, see the ones up here now? 8.5, yeah, that's what I want to see. And then here's 4.5 right there. 4.5, 8.5. Looks really good. Looks like I do have some tape, and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to check. It is easily within 1/4 inch. This is 9 and 10. I'm separate those. 9 is a 2.5 inch square, and 10 is 2.5 by 6.5. They're going to be sewn together before they go into the quilt. You can do that right now, or I'm going to clip mine, and when we assemble the quilt, I'll go ahead and put them together. These are trimmed. I have all these little sticky notes that I did when I cut my fabric, so when I go to put this back in the bag, I'm going to clip it. And I'll sew these two together when we go to do our quilt assembly. One more, this needs to be trimmed 2.5 by 6.5. Again, a little bit of tape, you can check it. Is it within 1/4 inch? Easily. It'll get taken up in the seam. Next week we have section 3, 4, 5, and 6 border blocks. I trimmed these already last week and I showed you. I can tell by looking at these, let's pull a few out, we're going to have some of the same issues. Let's just take a look at this one. This one's number 22. It's made up of two 2.5 inch squares. I already cut my 2.5 inch squares, so when I sew them together and then put it down to be quilted, I'm going to have the same thing where it's going to go right around the outside. You could cut them at 3.5 inches each and sew them together, and then when you get to the part where we're doing the fabric tack down, you'll have that extra that you could trim at the end. Since I've already got these cut, I'm just going to work with it, but let's look at them really quick. That way, if you haven't cut them already, you can make an adjustment to make it easier. This is number 20, really easy. 2.5 by 4.5, cut it 3.5 by 5.5, and then you can cut your batting still 3.5 by 5.5 because the batting gets tacked down and trimmed first. Block 16, I cut at 6.5 by 2.5. Just add an inch, 7.5 by 3.5. You can keep your batting at 7.5 by 3.5 because again, we tack down and trim our batting first. 39 are two 2.5 inch squares. You can cut them at 3.5 inch, just like I talked about the other squares. 36, 2.5 by 4.5. Just add an inch and cut it 3.5 by 5.5. And then I've got a 2.5 inch square for number 33. You can cut it bigger, 3.5 inches. And then all your blocks would be bigger, and when you go to trim, you won't have to worry about that tape getting caught in the seam allowance. Mine are already cut. I'm working with limited fabric. I'm not going to recut them. So I know I'm going to run into some of the same issues next week. Another thing you could do if you don't like taping right on the edge, you could cover it with a water-soluble stabilizer, that wash-away topping, and tape the topping. You could also use a spray and do a spray and stick that to the batting. I might try that next week and see how that works. I have some 505 spray. It's a temporary fabric adhesive. That's another thing you could do. Everything is cut and ready to go. Next week, we're going to go ahead and do the section 3, 4, 5, 6 border block, and we're going to assemble the quilt top minus the borders. I'm leaving the borders to this week. I actually haven't picked my border fabric yet. Before we get a final look at our blocks, I want to let you know I'm coming up with another project for clear blue tiles. If you haven't watched my clear blue tiles for beginners video, I'll go ahead and link that below. I actually open the box, we go through everything inside, talk about how to lay out and use the tiles, and we do a project that uses edge to edge. I'm coming up with something fun to do, a different type of quilting using our clear blue tiles. Look for that end of October, early November. Also coming in November, I'm going to work on the In All Things Give Thanks pillow. I've already pulled some fabric for that. I have the Autumn Fat Quarter Bundle by Lori Holt. I have it open because I used this for something else. It has a lot of the same colors. So if you're looking for fabrics for this, I can recommend this fabric bundle. You can see the green, orange, yellow, brown. We've got green, orange, yellow, some browns. It looks like it'll be a really good match for this. Watch for this in November. For next week's quilting, go through and look for sections 3, 4, 5, which is continued up top, and 6. I actually went through these at the end of last week's video. Look for those border blocks. Get those quilting files ready. We did do the large pinwheel this week, which technically is section 3, but that's okay. Let's take a final look at our blocks for this week. This was the week of October 13th. Come back on the week of October 20th. We'll finish off those border blocks, and then we'll assemble our quilt top minus the borders. These two blocks I'm going to clip and sew together. We did a lot this week. I don't think they're all going to fit on the screen. This one here, and our little pinwheels. They're also going to get sewn together before they go in the quilt. Thank you so much for joining me for the Candy Corn Quilt Shop Quilt Along. I hope you come back next week. We'll finish those border blocks, we'll get everything assembled, and I have to pick my inner and outer border fabrics. Please like, subscribe, and share. Leave any questions or comments in the comments box below, and I will see you next time.